Welcome to Manly Conversations with Jad T. Jones. In today's episode, I would like to share 3 of my favorite quotes from my favorite poet, William Blake. These quotes come from the poem called The Proverbs of Hell. This is a poem I stumbled upon when I was 17 years old, and many of the verses in this poem really helped me to navigate through the world and to create a winning philosophy that I used in my life as a young man. So the quotes go as follows. I'm gonna recite them and then we're gonna unpack them. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Prudence is a rich, ugly old maid courted by incapacity. You never know what is enough until you know what is more than enough. So once again, the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Prudence is a rich, ugly old maid courted by incapacity. You never know what is enough until you know what is more than enough. There is a lot of wisdom packed in these simple lines of text. So let me share with you what I have extracted from these simple verses. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. This means that when you live life to the fullest, when you take things too far, when you live in excess, you learn a lot of lessons. So an obvious one would be, let's say you drink, but then you go out and you drink excessively. Well, what happens is you learn a lot of lessons. You learn what your limits are. You learn where your limits are. You discover you make some really bad mistakes and then you learn from your mistakes. You see, the only place where we learn is through our mistakes. In order to learn, we have to make mistakes. And so the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom means push yourself, push things, take things a little too far, make some mistakes. And through that experience, you will learn a lot. Another example is going skiing. So a lot of people go skiing and then they'll go skiing the whole day and they won't even fall once. And at the end of the day, they'll say, "Hey, look at me, I went skiing the whole day and I never fell," thinking that that's a positive thing. But the truth is, if you skied the whole day and you never fell, that is a negative thing because that means you weren't pushing hard enough. You weren't pushing your limits. You did not learn anything. You were skiing well within and below your limits, and that is why you did not fall. And if you did not fall, if you did not push your limits, you did not learn anything. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. The guy who went skiing and at the end of the day has tons of bruises, he has snow down his pants, maybe he twisted his ankle, maybe he lost a ski or something. That's the guy that's going to come back with a lot more wisdom and a lot more life experience and a lot more fulfillment. So if you want to grow up wise, keep this in mind. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Prudence is a rich, ugly old maid courted by incapacity. So let me say that in normal English. Prudence means being overcautious, okay? Prudence is a rich, ugly, old maid. So if you're rich, but you're ugly and you're old, then being rich doesn't really benefit you, does it? And if you're a maid, which means you're a slave, that also doesn't benefit you. So you're rich, but you're ugly and you're old and you're a maid. Okay, so prudence, being too careful, is a rich, ugly, old maid courted by incapacity. Courted by incapacity means her body is incapacitated. Basically she's paralyzed. So what's the use of life if you're rich, but you're ugly, you're old, and you're paralyzed? So prudence is a rich, ugly, old maid courted by incapacity. Prudence is a rich, ugly, old maid courted by incapacity. So what William Blake is telling us there is life was not meant to be navigated through overcaution, through fear. You should not be motivated by fear, but rather by freedom, by growth. You want to go and explore. You want to say yes to life. Don't be too careful. It's okay to be a bit careful, but if you're too careful, then you're missing out on life. That's what he's saying. He's saying if you're living too carefully, if you're playing too much within the limits, then you're not really living. And then finally, the final quote that ties into these is, you never know what is enough until you know what is more than enough. This means that you have no idea what you're capable of until you push yourself past the limit where you thought your limit was. You never know what is enough until you know what is more than enough. Stop playing within the limits. Stop skiing safely where you never fall. Push outside your perceived boundaries to discover if any boundaries exist at all. You never know what is enough until you know what is more than enough. So many people make the error of living inside the limitations, living inside the lines, never pushing themselves, never pushing their limits. And if you don't push your limits, you will never know where your limits really are. And most of the time, we are completely wrong in terms of where we think our limitations are. We are capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. You never know what is enough until you know what is more than enough. So what you need to do right now is take yourself and bump yourself up against the world and get feedback. You can only know yourself in relationship to the world. If you're not bumping yourself up against the world, you cannot know yourself. And if you are not taking things too far, then you will never know where your limits are, and your learning curve will be incredibly slow. The people who learn the fastest and progress the fastest are the ones who make the most mistakes in the shortest period of time. So go out there, make more mistakes, push things further, side note, without hurting yourself or anyone else, and discover where your limits are and if any limits exist at all. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Prudence is a rich, ugly old maid courted by incapacity. You never know what is enough until you know what is more than enough. So this has been another manly conversation with Jad T. Jones. If this has benefited you, please share it with another man in your life. Let us grow this brotherhood all around the world so we may become an unstoppable positive force, a support system, and a community for all men. Thanks for listening. Take care.